Most systems work until they don't, until you're underslept and unfocused and emotionally scrambled. And that's when you find out if you've built a system or just a routine. And most people, including myself for a long time, built rituals, and these rituals depend on clarity and energy and motivation. And the real test of a system is what survives when none of these things are present and you have no clarity, no energy, and no motivation at all. Um, and a lot of these videos that I make for myself. So this is like a very small example, but it's real. You know, I've committed to like publishing. I've committed to myself to basically be publishing here on YouTube at a specific cadence. And right now I'm in Nashville for a work trip. And I've got a flight that I'm running dangerously close to late for. And I'm really totally off my routine. And I'm a creature of routine. And I'm recording in this hotel room at 4 a.m. a video. And I didn't really want to. I didn't really feel good. I thought to myself, oh, I'm gonna, I'll just do it later today. But I've committed to myself to doing it at a certain time, at a certain cadence. And so I'm doing it because the system really is not asking me to be inspired. It's actually not asking much of me at all. It's just asking me to show up. And most people build systems that depend on energy and clarity and consistency. But that real test happens when all three of those things vanish. When you're like, you've got brain fog and you are missing out on sleep and you're emotionally disoriented and you're unmotivated. The question is, does your system run without these things? Does your system run? If it doesn't, if your system doesn't run without motivation or sleep or focus, it's not a system. It's just a routine. And this really is not about optimization. It's about building something that still functions at 20% capacity. No emotions, no momentum, just execution under constraint. And so here are some of the mental frames and shifts that I've put into place to help me to shift into gear and actually implement a system that produces output for myself where previously I tried to just exert willpower or motivation or attention and schedule it and time block it, and then none of that ever worked. So here are some of the mental frames that I've implemented to actually start seeing results and progress and enabling myself to follow through and show up. Okay, what I'm giving you basically is the system I created for myself to generate consistent follow through where previously I could not. So the first mental frame shift that I generated to implement systems in my life that produce results that I couldn't previously is that you, number one, build for low power mode. Build for low power mode. Comes from a concept called constraint-first design. In engineering, you don't evaluate a system by how it performs under ideal conditions. We evaluate it by its failure modes. So what happens when inputs drop to zero? That's where resilience begins. So start by assuming you will not have access to clarity or discipline or motivation. That's baseline. Design your system for that situation specifically, and then scale up from there. From that baseline, you ask, what can still execute? Right? So strip the system down to default behaviors, not ideal habits. This is where people get stuck. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to be doing this. It's like, no. Like, assume your inputs all drop to zero. Your clarity, your discipline, your motivation, your sleep, your focus. What are your defaults? If you don't have a system that operates when all those things are gone, you have to build one. If you want to see results, if you want to see consistency. Otherwise, you will fail every time those things deplete, and you'll have volatile output, volatile follow through that will hurt your self-esteem, that will hurt your self-confidence, that will hurt your self-image. So it's about moving from that vicious cycle of oscillating between success and failure based on the levels of focus and energy that you have, to having a system that even when those levels oscillate, you're still performing consistently, right? And in implementing this system, you're not designing a life, you're designing a fallback script. So that's the first principle, is constraint-first design, or building for low power mode, essentially. Number two is reduce friction to zero, or as much to near zero as possible. So friction compounds under entropy. That's the second law of thermodynamics applies, right? Systems trend toward disorder unless energy is applied. And energy is exactly what you won't have. So you design a path of least resistance that still aligns with who you are. Any task that requires negotiation with your future self will fail. Any task that requires negotiation with your future self will fail. Predefined decisions. Predefined decisions. Remove decision branches and forks. Reduce each behavior to a binary. Did it run or not? This is called atomic principles of design, right? Have one interface, one rule, one result. Simplify. If your system involves asking or deciding or justifying, it's dead under pressure. It is dead. If your plan is to, for example, go to the gym and come up with your workout when you're there or halfway through, you're gonna quit halfway through, right? So now, like we simplify the way back into performance, right? So our first feature is build for low power mode, or constraint-first design. The second is reduce friction to zero, or second law of thermodynamics. The third is we automate entry points. Automate entry points into your system. So this is like activation energy theory in practice, basically. So every action has a startup cost. And when you're depleted, that cost determines whether the loop runs or whether the loop dies. So you embed cues and triggers and openings that relaunch the system without needing to convince yourself. Your system should reopen itself and pull you into it. If it waits for you to come back into it, you won't. And so what you have to do is create a touch point that relaunches everything, right? Whether like for me it is, and this is very difficult actually, is opening my Notion workspace daily tasks tab. It's really hard for me to do that. I have a ton of resistance to doing that every morning, but this is one of the things I've committed to do. One daily trigger that launches everything, right? Or maybe it's like one workspace tab in your browser that has everything, or maybe it's just like a note stock on your phone. But for me, having that one reset button where I go back and I say, okay, here's my touch point that relaunches everything and pulls me back into the system. And because here's where I know that this is going to have the highest ROI in terms of my performance and output and consistency, because I have the most resistance to it, which is why it goes back to our second principle, reduce friction to zero. I've got to make it super simple. So the only action I have to take is opening up Notion and reading all the tasks. And then it's really uncomfortable, but I am back into performance mode. I'm back into the system. So next, we want to remove any reliance on how you feel. So the fourth principle is to eliminate emotional permissions. So the Stoics understood this. Like emotion, human emotion is data. It's not a directive for you. It's information. So you don't need to feel aligned to act with clarity. Systems that require emotional coherence are weak by design. The goal in eliminating emotional permissions, it's not suppressing your emotions, it's decoupling your emotions from your actions. You remove mood as a gatekeeper for action. So this gets into this concept of behavior design a bit. So you want to design your behavior in a way that runs regardless of how you feel about doing that behavior. The system that you are implementing in your life cannot care or depend upon whether you're inspired or anxious or sad or numb or depressed or anything. It needs to operate below mood. Not because emotions are invalid, but because systems that depend on internal alignment will collapse under emotional noise. Under real pressure, precision becomes fragility. And so what we move into next is the fifth principle, which is we want to collapse resolution intentionally. This is adaptive resolution. So what do I mean by resolution? Because it's kind of, it has multiple concepts. I mean resolution in the sense of like pixelation, right? So high fidelity systems offer precision, but at the cost of fragility. Because under stress, you scale the system down, right? You ever watch something, you're streaming a television show, right? And when your internet gets bad, the show shifts from like 5K to like 480, right? And it gets all pixelated, right? But under stress, systems get scaled down. You don't lose structure. The image is still there, but you shift to a coarser level of processing. You preserve continuity, not detail. So when you're overwhelmed, reduced precision. I actually, in my head, I call this going into low res mode, where I just imagine all of myself and all of my life turning into like Legoland and like this very pixelated blocky when I'm under stress. And it's like, okay, lose all detail, lose all resolution. What am I doing? What is the wireframe of me performing right now? So your task list becomes 3 blocks at that point: now, next, and later. What am I doing right now? What am I doing next? And then the rest is a bucket list. So your review becomes a note. What's still true? Your planning becomes one choice: show up or don't, do or don't. Reduce everything to an atomic decision, a binary decision. Did I do it? Did I not do it? Am I going to do this right now, or am I not going to do this right now? Right? Complex systems require power. Low res systems require none. So know when to simplify to keep the loop running. And finally, learn from what remained. So the sixth principle is to observe what self-corrects. This is schema activation. Under stress, your brain defaults to its most deeply encoded behavioral patterns. So what persists in your behavior under stress is not preference, it's structure. So what still executes under pressure reveals what's real. And by what's real, I mean what's you. You don't need to reflect. Just watch what survived after the stress. That's your base. And it might be less than you thought. And after a hard stretch in your life, ask what still ran. Not what you planned, not what you wish you did, what actually executed consistently. That's your real system. Everything else is noise. So you want to preserve those elements that ran without resistance, remove the ones that died under pressure, and rebuild around what self-corrects, right? And find how did those elements that persevered under stress in my life, how did they persevere? And if there are other desired traits or habits or routines that I would like to systematize or convert from mere routines into systems, how can I apply the features that made these systemic in the things that did survive to the things that are desirable that did not? How can I systematize and preserve the behaviors that seem to not endure under stress? How can I make them resilient and anti-fragile? So if your system can't survive a bad week, it's not a system. You want to, again, build for constraint, build for noise, build for collapse. You don't need a perfect system. You need a system that shows up when you don't. That's what reliability actually means. You need a system that functions smoothly, that purrs, even when you're at 20%. So rewatch this video next time everything feels off, because that's when the system matters actually the most.